Okay, I had a little trouble getting on here. I better wait. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're missing a couple still. Oh, there's Councillor Armour's in. Councillor Withey's in, just waiting for them. There's Councillor Armour, Councillor Withey.
It's I can't start my video for some reason. It says the host has stopped it.
Well, did the host start Councillor Withey's video, please?
Test.
Sorry, 1 second. I'll be right with you.
Thanks, Natalie. There you are. All right. I will call the meeting to order and confirm that we have quorum and everyone present. And now that we have you present with video as well, Councillor Withey, would you do the land acknowledgement, please?
Certainly. Certainly. Thank you. Sorry, I just had to make sure I was on mute. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robinson-Huron Treaty number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred places, and take actions towards real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to a walking path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a resolution moved by Councillor Schumacher, seconded by Councillor Stone, is recommended that the special general committee meeting agenda dated Monday, November 29th, 2021 be adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? That carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. I will now turn the chair over to Councillor Withey for the corporate services portion of this meeting.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Just going to pull up the okay, so we're at new business, corporate services. I will, should I read the motion first? So the motion is the draft 2022 corporate services budget is attached to the report Corp 2021-85 be included in the town draft 2022 consolidated budget for consideration. And Reva, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do have a PowerPoint to share. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So we're here this afternoon to review the Corporate Services Draft 2022 Divisional Budget. This draft divisional budget is being put forward by the Budget Working Group, which consists of senior management team and myself. So the initial budget submission for corporate services was prepared by the corporate services leadership team and their staff, who I think have done an excellent job of budgeting for what they need to maintain current service levels throughout the divisions. So I wanted to thank all of the corporate services directors and their staff for all their hard work and attention to detail that went into putting this budget together. So I know we went through this morning, but just for those members of the public who didn't see that, there are two main things that are factored into the acceptable levy range that's determined in every given year. So this includes the allowable tax rate increase and the assessment growth that we expect to realize. So with respect to the tax rate increase, the budget and financial controls policy stipulates that the tax rate increase in any given year can be between CPI trim and 2 times that amount. So for 2022, this meant a 3.1 to 6.2% tax rate increase. In August of this year, this range was presented in the budget guidelines report to General Committee. The range that was based on the policy was not approved, but rather replaced with a recommendation for staff to prepare the consolidated draft budget with a tax rate increase of up to 4%. So now with respect to the assessment growth, MPAC was initially scheduled to release updated assessment data back in 2020, which was expected to result in significant assessment growth for 2021. Because of COVID-19, however, the release of this assessment was delayed. So we did receive new information in the last couple of weeks that this release has now been delayed even further, and it's not expected to be released now until 2023. So as a result of this, only the assessment changes related to new growth will be realized in 2022. Based on the information we have from MPAC, this new growth realized in 2022 is just over $107 million. So this information was used to calculate a maximum levy increase of 1.12 million. So, and that's based on the 4% tax rate increase. So this maximum allowable increase includes capital and operating. The capital levy increase for 2022, which was previously approved by committee for inclusion in the budget, was amounts to about 645,000. This means that the working group was tasked with ensuring an overall operating increase of no more than 475,000. The current draft budget does fall within this acceptable range. So at this point, the current total levy increase for 2022 is approximately 978,000, which equates to a 3.2% tax rate increase. So the proposed corporate services divisional budget, so this includes the CAO, human resources, legislative services, financial services, and the overall COVID-19 budget. The net levy increase for 2022 is about $223,000. So this is made up of about a $4,700 increase in capital contribution and $218,000 in operating. I do think it's really important to note that there are no service level changes proposed in 2022. So this means there are no increased levels of service, but no service reductions either. So I'd like to go through a summary of the significant changes by division within corporate services. And I'll also go over how the overall spending in these divisions will be funded. So in the CAO and HR budgets, there were a number of salary, wages, and benefits changes that impact the levy in 2022. So these things included a COLA increase and statutory and employee benefit changes. So that amounted to about $24,000. There's also a carry forward of a position reevaluation that was done in 2021. So because that position was reevaluated in 2021, the full amount of that position needs to be included in the 2022 budget. There was also a number of SWB changes that don't impact the levy in 2022. So these things included a position overlap for the HR generalist position. So this was presented to council back in September. And the overlap totals about $20,000, and it's proposed to be funded through the Human Capital Reserve because it is a one-time cost, a one-time increase in the SWB. There's also an allocation change for a position. So essentially, this is a transfer to the CAO budget from the governance budget, which we'll see later in legislative services. So in 2021, this position was allocated 20% to the CAO, but based on the actual time spent on tasks, that position's now been allocated differently. So now it's allocated 50% to the CAO. So you will see the reduction further on in legislative services. So the other significant change within the CAO and HR budgets are consulting fees. So these were reduced by about just over $13,000. And that's just based on anticipated needs. So the CAO consulting line was reduced by $5,000 and the HR consulting was reduced by about $8,400. So overall in this division, the operating costs anticipated are about $761,000. The majority of this is to be funded through the levy, which you can see there's property taxes of about 712 related to this division. The only other funding is the reserve funding from Human Capital Reserve to cover the position overlap for the HR generalist position. So moving on to legislative services, some of the significant changes here, there were capital contributions. So this includes contributions to both the IT capital reserve as well as the council chambers capital reserve. So the increase in 2022 is anticipated to be about $4,700. So just like in the CAO and HR budgets, there were a number of salary, wages, and benefits changes that impacted the levy in 2022. Oops, sorry, I'll go back. So the first one, the staff COLA and benefit changes totaled about $33,000. Then there's also the COLA increase and statutory benefit changes. So that increased the levy by about $9,000. There was also a reduction in council meeting per diem fees of about $3,000. So this line item was simply reduced. It wasn't eliminated entirely. There's also a carry forward of a position reevaluation that was done in our IT department in 2021. So similar to the HR position evaluation, because this was done in 2021, the full amount of that new position is included in 2022. There was also adding back some technical hours. So in 2021, there was a one-time removal of those hours because that specific person, as a result of COVID, was off. Those hours have now been brought back for 2022, and they equate to about $4,500 overall. So there's also a number of SWB changes that do not impact the levy in 2022. So these items include the addition of the elections coordinator position. So this was previously presented to committee back in September. So a total of 70% of this position, along with some additional hours for existing staff related to the election, is proposed to be funded through the election reserve. And I will talk a little bit about the election a little bit later on. So there's also a reduction to offset the increase in the allocation to the CAO budget. So as I mentioned in the last slide, there was an increase in SWB in the CAO budget. There's also a decrease in the governance budget and legislative services. And that was it equated to about $24,000. So another change in legislative services, there was an increase in funding from the building department. So this allocation is to fund a portion of records management, corporate information, and IT salary costs for staff, as well as some operating costs that the IT operating costs that the building department benefits from. So the fact that the building department has computers with Outlook, with our budget software, with Adobe, and all of those operating costs that are included in our IT budget, the building department benefits from that. So an allocation of those costs is transferred to the building department. So since the building department is self-funded, any increase in funding from that department does reduce the levy overall. So in 2022, this reduction specifically for legislative services is just over $15,000. So with respect to the election, the 2022 election costs have also been included in this draft budget. The overall election costs, including the elections coordinator, additional staff time, as I previously mentioned, total about $163,000 and are anticipated to be funded through the election reserve. So this next item, the one-time transfer from the working fund. So this is a $45,000 transfer from the working funds reserve into the election reserve. So that is to replenish the election reserve in order to ensure that we are able to cover the 2022 election costs. It is anticipated that this is a one-time transfer. It's not going to need to be repeated further down the line. We have done an analysis of that election reserve and feel that we will have enough for the 2026 election when we get to that point. So there's also a total of about $122,000 of 2021 one-time projects. So these projects have been removed from the budget. All of these costs were funded through reserves in 2021. So there's no net levy impact of 2022 in 2022 of these removals, but I thought it was important to mention that those one-time projects have now been removed from the 2022 budget. There are also 2 one-time projects in IT slated for 2022 with total costs of about $16,000. So these include an IT device inventory project at about $1,000 and a ransomware pre-engagement project for $15,000. So it is proposed that these be funded through the working funds reserve since they are one-time items. So overall in legislative services, there's about operating costs of about $2 million. These costs also include contributions to various reserves of just under $200,000. So the majority of this is to be funded through the levy. As you can see, there's property taxes of about $1.6 million. However, there are several specific other funding sources that should be noted. So our revenues, including the internal allocations like the building department recoveries, user fees, etc. We're anticipating about $139,000 worth of revenues to help support that spending amount. And then there's some various reserves. So the working funds reserve is proposed to fund those one-time IT projects totaling about $16,000. There's also that one-time transfer. So essentially in the budget, it's like an in and an out. It's transferring between reserve funds. So it's coming in, being funded through the working funds for $45,000 and going into the election reserve for $45,000. And then coming out of the election reserve, it is the full cost of the 2022 election. So that equates to about $163,000. So as I mentioned earlier, there's about $200,000 worth of contributions to reserves. So I wanted to point out specifically what that includes. So there is a $20,000 annual transfer for the council chambers expansion reserve. There's also the $29,000 annual contribution to the election reserve. There was the $45,000 contribution into the election reserve as well, and that's a one-time contribution. Also included in legislative services, we do bring in revenue for license of occupation annual leases. Well, all of the revenue for those annual leases is transferred into the Parks Capital Reserve. So that's about $19,000 that will be transferred into the Parks Reserve. There's about $50,000 annually towards the Corporate Software Reserve, $5,000 annually to the Corporate Information Reserve, and $30,000 annually to the Records Management Reserve. So that makes up about $200,000 contribution to the various reserve funds. With respect to capital, we are looking at capital project spending, which has been included in Appendix B in the report. The total spend for legislative services is about $57,000. The entire amount is anticipated to be funded through a combination of the Council Chambers Reserve and the IT Capital Reserve. The net levy contributions to these capital reserves total just under about $73,000. And again, that's in Appendix B of the staff report. So moving on to financial services. Again, there were a number of SWB changes that impact the levy. There's the COLA increase, including statutory and employee benefits. So that, amounts to about $25,000 for the entire financial services division. There's also the addition of the new part-time finance assistant position that was previously presented to committee in September. So that totals about $30,000. Again, in financial services, like we saw in legislative services, there was an increase in funding from the building department. So this allocation for financial services relates to finance, insurance, and customer service salary costs, as well as an allocation of the insurance premium and deductible budgeted costs. And those are all things that the building department benefits from. So since the building department is self-funded again, any increase in funding from that department does reduce the net levy overall. So in 2022, this reduction specifically for financial services is just over $32,000. It is anticipated that insurance premiums will also increase substantially, although it's unclear at this point exactly what the amount will be. So staff, in consultation with our insurance company, have estimated an increase of between 15 and 20% in 2022, which equates roughly to a $160,000 increase in our premiums. This significant increase is anticipated to be offset slightly by changes in deductibles. So overall deductibles are anticipated to reduce by about $20,000. So similar to how we saw a one-time transfer in legislative services to the election reserve, there is a one-time transfer from working funds to a dedicated local share hospital reserve of $115,000. So essentially it's moving $115,000 from working funds reserve into a separate dedicated local share hospital reserve. So it is unclear at this point what amount the province is requesting. So staff felt that it was prudent. Staff felt that it was prudent to do a one-time transfer at this point. And once more detailed information is available with respect to the request, staff can bring back a more accurate proposal at a later date. This information likely won't be known until later in 2022.
Excuse me, Reva.
Yes.
I'm not sure I understand what information is going to show up in 2022 about the local share hospital reserve. Did you mean to say 2032? Because that's the likely time frame.
To you, Mr. Chairman. So at this point, it's unclear as to what the amount is that the province is ultimately requesting of the various municipalities. So until more information is known, we don't know what the plan is. We will have to look at that and provide a proposal. Hopefully we get the information sooner than later, but as you said, I mean, we may not have the information at all in 2022. So as soon as we have that information readily available, we can certainly come up with a proposal on how we can fund that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's heard me go on about this before. I guess as long as this money going into this reserve isn't locked into this reserve and we can remove it at a future time, I get the symbolism of it. But in reality, there's nothing happening for 10 years. The local share that we've heard about in the past is some $70 million, which is absolutely undoable for us. And the likelihood of this whole plan coming to fruition is $650 million total to build 2 brand new hospitals, which again, I find to be very unlikely. And they're only at stage 1A of a 5-stage, which equals to 6-stage process. So they're not going to even find out until stage 5 or 4 from the province whether there's a hope of this plan coming true. So if you look at Fairburn, for an example, we started talking about Fairburn redevelopment in 1997. And we're in 2021 and maybe have this done by 2023. So there's your timeline. But as I said, as long as this money isn't going to be locked in there and can't be removed when the wheels fall off this plan, then I'm okay with it. But that's just there's your explanation. I'd take a large wager on you that you're not going to hear anything next year. I'm telling you that. But anyway, carry on. Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so where was I here? So in 2022, there is one-time project that has been included in 2022 that costs with total costs of $15,000. So this relates to the security assessment report that was previously approved in 2021. Due to time constraints, staff are recommending to carry forward this project to 2022 and propose that the project be funded through the Working Funds Reserve, since it is a one-time item. I think it's really important to note here that originally when this assessment report was approved, it was to be funded through consulting fees in the CAO's budget for 2021. So I think it's very important that the consulting fees that were expected to fund those costs in 2021 have not and will not be spent in 2021. So there were also several income and revenue budget lines that are anticipated to increase in 2022. So these things include lease revenue from the InfraPipe property. And that lease revenue is approximately $445,000. So this funding is entirely transferred into a reserve for future use. So there is no net levy impact in 2022 of this additional lease revenue. There are also some tax-related revenues that are expected to increase. So tax certificate fees and notices, mortgage processing fees, interest and penalties on taxes. So we are anticipating for those to increase by about $12,000. We're also looking at interest earned on investments that are anticipated to increase by about $34,000. Supplementary taxes are also anticipated to be significantly increased by about $125,000. So this brings our total budgeted supplementary tax revenue to about $400,000 in 2022. In 2021, we've already realized almost $470,000 in supplementary taxes. So this is a relatively difficult area to budget since it really depends on the timing of MPAC assessments and whether new growth has been picked up in the roll book or whether assessments were done afterwards. So it's kind of a function of the open building permits around year end. So the last item here is the Community Improvement Program. This was a council initiative back in 2021 and is still included in the 2022 budget, but has now been moved from financial services to development services and is proposed to be funded through the short-term rental MAT program. So this has reduced the levy in 2022 by about $45,000. So with respect to the funding, overall there are operating costs anticipated of just over $3.1 million in financial services. So these costs also include contributions to the various reserves of just over $1 million, and I will give some detail of what those reserve transfers are. The majority of this $3.1 million spend is to be funded through the levy. As you can see, there's about, actually it's not the majority, a good chunk of the spend is funded through the levy, just under $600,000. There are some other specific funding sources that I wanted to go through though. So revenues, which includes the internal allocations, the building department, user fees, that kind of thing. We are anticipating revenues of about $2.1 million. Supplementary taxes, net of any write-offs throughout the year, we're anticipating to be about $344,000. And then the working funds reserve is proposed to fund the one-time security assessment project for $15,000 and the one-time transfer into the local share hospital reserve of $115,000 that I previously mentioned. So just to go through a little bit of detail of the contributions to those reserves that I mentioned of just under $1 million. The InfraPipe lease, as I mentioned earlier, of about $445,000 of revenue that is being brought in is put into a separate reserve for future use. There's also working funds transfers into the working funds reserve of about $458,000. And then there's the hospital reserve contribution of $115,000. So for the COVID budget, everything in 2021 is essentially considered a one-time item. So it gets really confusing looking at all of the changes or the ins and outs, since there really isn't a base level for this budget. Because of this, I'm just going to give a quick overview of what's included in 2022. So there are some general costs of approximately $1,000. So this relates to signage, personal protective equipment costs, that sort of thing. The assessment center is also confirmed to be running to the end of March of 2022. So these costs and the funding source has been included to the end of March. It also includes the usage of the 2021 Safe Restart funding of about $423,000. That's everything I had. So I am available for questions.
All right, I see a couple of hands already. I was just struggling with my button there, so I don't know who is. I think Deputy Mayor Alcock goes first.
Thank you, Councillor Withey. If I may, it's a follow-up actually to a question I had this morning, and I had a very good explanation. But it's with reference to the human capital reserve. And I understood that it's to be used for one-time funding. And so the use of it for overlap funding for the positions in public works. And then, so when I looked at, we're doing it again for the overlap in the HR department. I think the response might be, and in fact, Reva, you said it, that we're using the reserve, human capital reserve, because it's one-time funding. But in my mind, I look at it and I think perhaps it is one-time funding for that particular position. But if you look at the practice isn't one time. The practice might be more common, because I understand why the idea of having an overlap, you know, so that someone can spend time and mentor and train. And so the practice itself is not one time. So to me, I think it's not quite accurate to use the reserve for one-time funding when in fact it may be become more common practice. So I think that if you look at the total of that, it's not, you know, a ginormous amount of money, but it's maybe close to $80,000, which would normally be moved over in our operating account. So I guess your response to that would be I'd be really interested to know your response on that.
Reva?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. You know what, Nancy, that's Councillor Alcock, it's a very interesting question, and I hadn't really thought of that before. But I think with respect to the one-time nature of it, yes, it is common practice for certain positions to have overlaps, but those are really key positions, and we don't have overlaps for everything, right? Because not everything requires an overlap. So specifically for the HR generalist position, we do have a 3-month overlap built in, because there are so many little nuances with the town payroll that you need to have a good kind of training overlap with the existing person, because the payroll really right now is being done by that one HR generalist position. And they have that knowledge that needs to be transferred, which just can't be done on a piece of paper. Right. So, you know, yes, for certain positions, there might be an overlap, but I think, you know, since I've been here, I really haven't seen a lot of overlap. So I think we're seeing a lot in 2022, specifically because we have a lot of retirements in 2022, and that's the way it came up about. But, you know, there are some other retirements that we know of in 2022 that are not incurring an overlap. So I think it's kind of, it's really position dependent on when those are done. Does that sort of answer your question?
If I may, to a quick follow-up, I do appreciate that, Reva. I think that's a great response. I will beg to differ, though, that there might only be a handful. I think if is value in this, they're actually, and given your comment that we will have a number of retirements coming up, maybe not all of them are doing the overlap, but we might see more of it. And I will repeat, I don't think this is one time, and I don't think it should be viewed as one time, because it's skewing what in fact we're spending for SWB. And so I think that that's, I'm not sure that, you know, once or twice, I get it, one time, but I believe this is going to be more common. And then I think we should view it as a regular line item.
Thanks. Just as if I can just jump in because it's on topic, wondering, we've got retirements, and I'm wondering if what we've put in for placeholders for salaries for replacements, because typically for maybe somebody's coming in with less experience, et cetera, or starts at a different level on a salary band, are we just plugging in the same number that the retiring person is making now for next year? Anybody? Is that-
It's Julia,
Okay.
Dr. McKenzie. I was just going to say, a few years ago, we did make a conscious decision through the budget working group and through the budget process to budget all positions at job rate. That was done quite a few years ago, and that's so that we don't have these big fluctuations every year in different departments when people are trying to make up money if somebody goes from, from a single to a family, or they go up a different pay band. So there is most employees are at the job rate, but you are correct, and you'll see that when we do our Q3 or our quarterly reporting, that there could be some variances if we do have a lot of new staff coming in at the first step. The other thing just to note too is not all employees come in at the first step. When they're hired, they could have come in at a different job rate, or depending on their experience.
But for the purposes of this budget, the number that's in there is the number of the of the retiring person. Is that what's making up this number? Just wondering, is that the level that we're keeping it at? Riva?
Yes.
Had a finger up there?
Yeah.
Hope it's the right one.
It is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes, you're correct. So each of the positions is evaluated at a specific band. So what we do is budget at job rate. So there's kind of step 1, step 2, and job rate. So as Director McKenzie alluded to, not everybody coming in is automatically at step 1, so at the lowest band. So in order to ensure that we have the necessary budget in place to hire the appropriate people for the positions, we budget at job rate. So essentially, yes, for example, the HR generalist that's leaving has been at the town for several years. That position is currently being paid at job rate. It could very well be that we get somebody to fill that position that comes in at step 2. So there will be a little bit of savings when we bring back the quarterly forecasts.
So job rate, the definition, sorry, just so I'm clear, job rate is the pay that person who's retiring is making now.
Yes.
Okay, so Director Hernan, who's retiring, I'm not so sure job rate should be there for his position because of the many years of experience and tenure that he's had, but we're keeping it at his exiting job rate. Yes?
So I'm going to defer, if I can, to our CAO. She had her hand up.
Okay, sorry. Carry on, Denise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to confirm, when it comes to, salaries and wages for incoming staff members, it would depend on the level of experience and length of time that they're bringing to the organization. So even though we budget at job rate, as noted, it would depend on the incumbent where we place them within the grid. So we would use that for negotiations with respect to new hires. So it depends. So the individual we're hiring might be starting at step 1, they might be starting at step 2, or we might be hiring them at job rate. So that's why we actually have accounted for the job rate, because we don't know at this point in time the caliber of the candidates that we'll be attracting, and the wage that's offered to them as part of the negotiation of the employment. So that's why we budget for job rate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm taking up so much time. Councillor Thompson, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Riva. Riva, with regards to the Interpipe lease of 400,000 plus, I think you mentioned it's going into a reserve, whether it was general reserve or whatever. A couple of questions with regards to that. The first one is, why would that not be allocated into general revenues, much the same way we do with the Lakeland dividend? Because I'm thinking this is not a 1 or a 2 year kind of a lease payment. This is going to be an ongoing lease payment, and I'm just wondering what the rationale is what the rationale is for putting this into a reserve, and then what would the eventual usage of that reserve be? Multi-part question.
Riva?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, I'd like to defer to Director McKenzie. I believe she wanted to add something.
Director McKenzie?
Thank you. I was just trying to pull up the motion. I just can't get my hands on it, but there is a council motion that has been passed to put that money into a reserve for environmental reasons. So if there is any cleanup that is required on that money is set aside for that. So that was the direction of council. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Councillor Thompson.
Yes, it does. And I guess I'm looking, are we looking like at a sunshine clause with regards to that reserve, or that I mean, at what point do we say, okay, we've got $40 million in here for after 10 years or after 100 years, or we've got $4 million after 10 years? Do we have like an ultimate amount that we would say that would be an acceptable amount for setting aside? I appreciate the rationale behind the usage of that for environmental purposes. Makes good sense considering the history of that property. But is there a sunshine clause? Is there an ultimate amount we're looking at?
I don't have the answer to that. We haven't done an overall strategy on that property yet. That's been presented to council. So I think I would look to our mayor to provide some information on that. I believe she's got some.
Well, and it just so happens she's next in the queue. Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, there will be a strategy down for the property, but it wasn't strictly for environmental. I mean, we do know that was the original tannery property and some wood properties. So we do want an environmental reserve on it, but it's also a reserve for the redevelopment of the property should it become someday something other than an industrial piece of land. So you're right, maybe we should set a sunset clause on it, you know, whether it be something once it reaches $3 or $4 million, but that will be something to be determined. What we did with that motion is just ensure that it went into a reserve for the eventual redevelopment of that property. Now, can I have my question?
Yes, yeah, I was going to say anything further.
No. Yeah, I have a question, and I actually want to follow up on one, and that was the discussion about the job rates and everything. I mean, we have done replacements where we've had overlap for positions, and some of the ones I remember is like things like a maternity leave, and generally the CAO can do those overlaps within budget because I believe they have a surplus because every position is budgeted at job rate. And I'm assuming that's where you've done overlaps before. And I might ask you to confirm that that's where that money comes from, or where does that surplus money go each year?
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, respond to that.
Yes, of course, please.
So to the mayor's point, we, as committee's aware, we do budget for job rate in all positions, and it's a 3-step progression through those steps. And typically that is a true statement whereby not everyone would be at job rate. We do have a lot of positions that are currently at job rate now just by virtue of the number of years that they've been here and the progression through the grid. We do have a very little bit of flexibility within that grid because we budget for job rate. So I do have the ability to perhaps start a position a few weeks earlier. It doesn't seem to work out that way. I can honestly tell you that more often than not, regardless of how soon we advertise and do the interviews and get someone on board, they're literally brushing shoulders while one is leaving and one is coming in. It's very difficult to ensure that we have the transition. A perfect example is our Director of Operations and Protective Services. We started a number of weeks ago, and it looks like now we won't have as much time as for that individual to mirror the director as what we had hoped, just by virtue of the process. So I think it's fair to say, because the number of retirements that we're seeing come up, I think Deputy Mayor Alcock makes a very, very good point with respect to maybe we really need to look at this as a more permanent thing, because over the next 5 years, we have a lot of people retiring. So this is something new for all municipalities. It's not something very common, because typically people come, they stay, and you don't see people leave very often. We have had a lot of staff turnover in the past year and a half, and we have a lot of retirements moving forward. So I think that Deputy Mayor Alcock makes a really valid point, which we definitely will take back and discuss amongst our senior team. So thank you for that. But to your point, Mayor Terziano, with the number of vacancies that we're expecting over the next year or so, I can't guarantee I would have enough flexibility with what's budgeted for job rate and what we're actually paying people at this point in time. So we're just a little leery to rely on that. So that's why that's before you in this budget for 2022. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I hadn't got to my
yeah,
question yet.
sorry.
I was following up. So now's my question. Thank you for your indulgence. And it goes back to almost the last slide, I think, that Reva was talking about, or the one just before COVID. And I just want clarification. I think you said we actually put $400 and some thousand into the working fund reserve. Can you just, where's that come from?
Reva?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So a large portion of what makes up that 450,000 is actually the Lakeland dividend. So I think Councillor Thompson had alluded to that before, where during the year we get about $425,000 worth of dividends from our Lakeland holding. We only keep 100,000 of that in operating revenue. The rest of it goes into the working funds reserve. The other sort of pieces of that relate to maintaining our working funds reserve, and Director Mackenzie might speak better to this than I can, because it goes back a number of years to before my time. So Julia, I don't know if you wanted to speak to the other items in there.
Julia?
Sorry, is this to just the other items that are going in? Oh, okay. So the other ones that we've been typically putting in every year is we had in our reserve level policy, we had in that report we originally did it, we had talked about putting some savings from the debentures when they kind of go down in the payments each year, that we would set aside a portion of that to go into general working funds. So that's about 63,000, sorry, 70,000 that we've been putting into that working funds each year. I think I went back and I think it's for the past 2 years. Before that, it was a different amount, but it was around 70,000. The other amount that goes in there is 63,750, and that goes back to when we did the before we did our last DC bylaw, and we directed all of our we directed the funds that we collected on DCs over to the indoor recreation fund, and that was so we could pay off more of a portion of the Canada Summit Center debenture. So those were savings that we left in the budget, or that were experienced by moving those funds to help pay for our debenture, and we put those funds going into back into working capital. So that's the 63,750. So Reva's right. In total, there's about, I'm trying to think how much in total that we put in each year. It's around
About 458,000.
Yeah, that's correct. And we've been doing that for quite some time.
So that reserve, the working funds reserve, as of the middle of the month, has almost $2.5 million in it.
That's correct.
So how much, I mean, to the points that are brought up, how much do we need to keep pumping in there to, rather than to use, put the money into our general account sort of thing? What is there a magic number? We keep flooding this. It's a lot of money in there. I mean, we've got over $19,000 in reserves, including the negative fleet reserve. of 1.7. There's still, that's included. So that's a lot of money that we've got stashed away in these little hidey holes everywhere. And then we go back to the taxpayer for more money every year. When we're just stashing, I mean, 2.5 in that run reserve. We still have the Forbes Hill amount sitting there with $3.4 million. So anyway, yes, Julia. Sorry, Jonathan, I'll get right to you. Sorry.
Sorry, just to clarify, just to add to that point. So we do have the reserve fund policy, or the financial reserve policy, that was just updated this year in June. And part of that, not part of the update, but part of the original policy was that council wanted to have that fund set between 5% and 20%. So no less than 5% and no more than 20% of operating expenditures. So the maximum amount would be 3.9 million. So we're still below what the maximum amount is. So we are in the good range of where council wanted that reserve set as.
What's 5% on the other end?
Sorry. It's 983,000.
983, and we're at 2.439. All right. Councillor Weed, please. Sorry for the delay.
No problem. Thanks for that. Actually, that was very intriguing. My question has to do with the election. So I know that we made a decision a way back to put money in every year for the election reserve. Can we get a little bit more detail on what the shortfall would have been had we just done just taken from the regular every year's contribution, and then how much exactly the additional help is costing? So just get a better breakdown of that, of the election portion of this discussion.
Riva?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. That's an excellent question. So we did have that $45,000 one-time transfer. So without that transfer, we still would be able to fund the 2022 election. Where that kind of gets us into an issue is in the 2026 election. So at this point, to Councillor Withey's point, we do have funds available in that working funds reserve. So we felt it prudent to do the one-time transfer of that $45,000 to help replenish that reserve. So we have anticipated, so in 2022, the election costs are roughly $163,000. Those costs can be covered by the election reserve as it is. That will only leave us about $5,500 in the reserve. And then we do our annual transfers for the next 4 years until the 2026 election. And we're anticipating costs of roughly $175,000 at this point, just factoring in inflation and that sort of thing. So at that point, we would be putting the reserve into a deficit position of about $35,000. So, which is why we were anticipating that one-time transfer.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I just wanted to follow up. So the additional staff that we're using for the election, are we anticipating that we'll always need extra staff to run the election, or is this an odd year? I mean, shouldn't we typically be able to just run an election with the staff that we have, or is this, I guess, the new normal where we're going to have to bring on extra staff or an extra position?
And through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to defer the question to our Director of Legislative Services.
Okay, Tanya, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Withey. Thank you for the question, Councillor Weed. So as you probably know, we've been functioning in the Clerk's Department with just a couple of us for quite some time, and it's been very taxing to try to keep afloat with all the changes, especially with all the COVID, with the webcasting, and it's all very taxing in that area. So we've been fortunate enough to have Natalie join us for the last few months and help relieve that amount. And so for next year, it's going to be a really great asset for us to have that position to help us with all of that on top. But the election itself we started it, as you know, we came to council with a bylaw in May. So that's how far back we've already started doing the election. It's quite a huge process. It's not just a few months before the election. And the ability to be able to have an extra position has allowed us also the opportunity to do a little bit more than an education in that area that we haven't been able to do before because we just couldn't keep everything afloat at the same time. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Councillor Weed.
Jonathan?
It does, thank you. And I was wondering, and I don't know if this is the right forum to float the idea that some municipalities, they kind of take time off in the summer. And I'm wondering if we might want to explore every year on election year that we might take the August or one of the months off right up before the election as a policy to try and assist with this process. I'm just wondering if, again, I don't know if this is the right forum to discuss it, but maybe going forward, something to consider.
I mean, when we're lame duck.
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Thompson, please.
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Chair. I concede my position to Councillor Armour because he hasn't asked a question yet, but I would like to follow up if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Should we leave it up to Councillor Armour?
There's some really good, healthy conversation going on here. Mine might have to do with the hospital funding and the money in there. I believe that there was a resolution on the book that we put through quite a while ago about funding the hospital. I think that's why you find it in this account today or in this budget today.
Yeah, which I said is fine as long as it's not locked in there because I'm pretty sure it'll never go towards the hospital. But anyway, sorry. Thanks, Councillor Armour. Councillor Thompson, you're up again.
Yes, thanks. And my question is sort of related but unrelated in a way, Mr. Chair. The discussion of or the topic of debentures has arisen here during the discussion here, and I'm just wondering what our position is with regards. I think do we have 5 existing debentures, and what position are we in with those debentures now?
There's a page there that shows 5. The earliest retirement date is November 23, and that's for the theater and town hall. And that's for the balance is currently remaining balance 165,000. Center Street Extension, March 2025, 170,000. Some odd. Downtown Waterfront, July 2026, 533,000. Rivermill Park and Fire Truck, I guess that was a deal to get those together, December 2027. And G8 and other capital projects, the big one, May 2030, 3.7 million. It's in the second page of this corporate services budget book.
I did see that, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for that. I was just confused as to the end dates with those, and maybe I wasn't reading through it properly. But I think Reva had her hand up. The index.
Something to add, Reva?
Yeah, I was just going to, sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to reiterate that, yes, that this is included in the report package, and that debt retirement date is showing the month and year that debt will be paid off, if that helps.
So if I could, did you have a follow-up, Councillor Thompson? Sorry, did you wave your hand there?
No, I was just saying thank you and thumbs up to everybody.
Oh, okay, sorry. Now, here's an interest, with what you just said. We've got a couple of balances here, and I know the interest rates aren't huge, but with the reserves that we have, say we take the smallest 2 of those and just paid them now, would we be saving a bunch of money in interest? Can you pay them off before their time? Is that allowed? Who wants it? Julia. Sorry, Director.
The debentures that we have on hand don't have balloon payment options. So the rates were set based on that. So in general, you can't pay them off early.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Terziano, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking about the hospital local share fund, I don't know if somebody can find the resolution that Councillor Armour referred to on our books, because I don't recall what we actually did, but I think we do need to have a a discussion prior to passing this budget because one, I disagree that any contribution to the local share for hospital is going to be a one-time thing. That the whole premise of starting it now is so that when we get to whatever year a new hospital or a hospital renovation, whatever the case may be, if we don't have a local share, we put ourselves at a disadvantage, especially a disadvantage to a municipality just south of us who has a local share put away for any kind of future hospital. So I don't agree that it's a one-time thing. I think we need to have a plan as to how we're going to start putting money away on an annual basis. And as Councillor Withey points out, it may be 15 years down the road, but you know, if somebody were putting money away for a new Fairburn back in '97, we may not have been looking to the district for 60 million today. So I think it's prudent that we start thinking about putting something away for healthcare, and it does not need to be locked into a bricks and mortar hospital. It just needs to be locked into our local share towards something, I think. So I don't know whether staff can prepare something on that or whether we will need a resolution to do something.
I guess my point on that, Mayor Terziano, is that we've got all these reserve funds already set up. I mean, you could just rename Forbes Hill for 3.3 million into your hospital reserve fund overnight if you found yourself in that position where you needed to fund something tomorrow. But if it's got to have a label, that's fine. I get it. But we do have, you know, $19,000 stashed away into various reserve funds that seem to be not doing anything now. That was kind of my point. But anyway, CAO Corey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I did just send a copy of the resolution to all members of committee, so you should have it in your inbox. I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, if you feel I need to share it on the screen, but Section 8 does clearly identify that municipalities in the Muskoka region and East Perry Sound initiate appropriate internal financial planning to identify appropriate methods to fund the financial or in-kind contribution required to support the capital cost of the hospital expansion or new hospital construction to serve the Mock catchment area. So that's already in a resolution of council. And to the mayor's point, a report will have to be forthcoming with respect to that section of the resolution.
Geez, and look who moved that. You caught me red-handed.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Mr. Chairman.
Damn it.
But we will certainly, I will certainly have staff be bringing something forward in the next few months with respect to that.
Thank you. Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a little bit of a follow-up from this morning, and that's when I was asking the question about the number of things being funded from working reserves. And I did go back and look at the 2021 budget, and I could not see anything that we actually funded from working reserves. We funded many things from specific reserves, and we funded things from the modernization fund. But I don't believe that funding things from working funds is a practice that we've held in the past. I can't find it anywhere. That said, I'm not against funding some of these things because, as Councillor Withey pointed out, we have a good chunk of money in that reserve. So it does make sense that we use some of it if we're having trouble keeping the levy at a reasonable rate. And to that point, I guess what I would say overall is last year we had a 2.37 levy increase. This year we're looking at a 5.76 levy increase. And I know that we approved the budget guidelines, but when we did that, we did it, I think, with some assumptions, and that is that COVID would be behind us, and that's not necessarily true, that there would be new impact assessments to draw on, and that is not happening. And we also didn't realize that we'd be finishing 2021 with a huge surplus. So overall, I'm not really comfortable with a 5.76 levy increase. And I would ask staff if they could please find us, and because I actually believe that you have it, because I believe I've seen it somewhere, what our levy increase has been for the last 10 years. it seems a bit high for me, and I think we can do a bit better. And I can't go through the budget line by line to tell you where to make cuts, but I will suggest that one of our largest resources, our staff, our largest expense, and therefore one of our largest increases this year, and that's the 3.1% COLA. If you look at the government, the Canada pension plans, they're going up 2.4%. If people on fixed incomes can live with a 2.4% increase, then I think that we need to look at something less than 3.1% for our staff as one of the starting points.
Any response, or we'll just thank you, Mayor Terziano. Deputy Mayor Alcock, please.
Thank you, Councillor Withey. First, I actually concur with the comments made by Mayor Terziano. I think especially the reference to Revenue Canada and you know, the cost of living increase that they stick by. And one of the things I just wanted to make that comment, but I also, if staff are going to look at some of the items that we have included, I do have a question around, and I know it's, again, not a lot of money, but it was a security assessment. And I wanted clarity because we deferred that once already. And so now we're including it in the 22 budget. And the security assessment, that wasn't an IT security assessment. That's something else, right? That was another, right? And so is there a reason why we feel that that's a critical item that we need to get on the agenda for 22? If we've already deferred it once, perhaps we could consider deferring it again.
Anybody? Director McKenzie?
So this item has, it's a bit confusing because there's two security items and they were for the same amount, but this one, it was for specifically for the cameras and the physical assessment, so not the IT portion. So we haven't deferred this one already. It was brought forward because more information was needed on that, and it was approved to be done in 2021. However, we're just finding at this time there's just not enough time before the end of the year to actually have it completed. So we're looking to defer it until 2022. So keeping the funding intact and just moving it, recognizing the fact that we likely won't have it done in the next month.
Follow up?
Please, thank you, Councillor Withey, and thank you, Julia, for the response. So, okay, I get it now. So council, this was a directive, we've approved it, and so we're saying, let's go ahead. And so really you're responding to a council directive to say this is important. Yep.
Julia?
Just to follow up to that, and certainly if council thinks that we should defer it another year, we can certainly look at deferring that until 2023.
I just want to say I'd be in supportive of that. So just for reconsideration, maybe as to the requirement.
Somebody jotting that down. I see Director Kalea flashed up there. You've got something on this?
Thank you, Councillor Withey. So in regards to the security of the cameras and everything, everything was going to be reviewed, and we are currently not following policy. So I would highly encourage not to defer that another year, if I may. I'd really like to get that reviewed and in line.
Okay. Councillor Thompson, please.
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Chair. A couple of things. First of all, to Director Kalea's point, I think she makes some very valid points, because any pictures that we did get from our existing security cameras are basically non-usable, I think, because they're just not clear enough. So I would support her in that particular position. With regards to the mayor's comment about reducing the 3.1% to 2.2, I'd just like to remind committee that last year's increase was 0.7%. not even a full percent. So if you average the two, 0.7 and 3.1, and average that over 2 years, that's a 1.9% increase, and that brings it in well under the 2% that has been suggested there. So I would not support anything less than the 3.1. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments, questions? We're good. Mayor Terziano, please.
I guess I think something that was said this morning, if you want direction to go back, do you want it by resolution, or are you taking it by the discussions that we're having?
CEO Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we would be a staff requesting a resolution of committee because any direction that is given with respect to budget would have to be by the majority of council. So I've heard a couple of things mentioned today. I've heard mention with respect to COLA increase. I've heard recommendations of deferring things to a future year if that's something that you would still like to proceed with, but we would be requesting at this time actual motions to be put on the table to be voted on to give direction to the senior team to amend the budget for the final, for the consolidated budget that's presented on December 15th. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So that resolution can come at the consolidated budget meeting on December 15th, then you're saying?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I would like to suggest that if there's recommendations from committee at this point in time, that it would be helpful to have those resolutions now, because what will happen is once these divisional meetings are completed, then the senior team will take the directives of the committee and will work on preparing the consolidated draft budget, which is to be presented on December 15th, as opposed to waiting until December 15th and then giving direction at that point in time for us to come back. We can actually be working on it before the consolidated draft budget's presented in December. So we would respectfully request those resolutions at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm thinking that that's going to be tough to do with the scope of this conversation. I know there was a number of items that I wanted to circle back on myself. I mean, we could pick off a few things now, but does that mean we can't bring in things on the 15th as well? Or are you saying do it today, or there's your chance? I mean,
yeah, absolutely not, Mr. Chairman. I think today, if you know how you feel today about what's been presented to date, the other option is you can wait until the final divisional discussion takes place later this week. And then at that point in time, if you're prepared to present motions that we can work on to prepare the consolidated budget. But if we get to December 15th and something new has come to light, or you've had the opportunity to review further and have further changes, they absolutely can be presented at that meeting as well. But I have heard some suggestions today that if committee is willing to vote on, then that will give the senior team some time to work on that prior to the budget being presented in December.
I thought you might give that answer. Mayor Terziano?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So without a resolution today, you are going to come back on the 15th with the same budget that you presented today, without any resolutions.
That is correct.
Okay, and yet I guess we haven't even seen the rest of the budget presented yet. So it's a little hard to make a resolution right now when we've got a couple of departments still left to see.
And quite frankly, I'm not, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to finish with not really the best of processes is this. That's my opinion. But
yeah, and I agree with you. I feel that I've got a number of things sort of floating around in my brain right now that I want to study further before it would come to a resolution type process. I do believe that that without having everything else discussed as well, it makes it a little bit more challenging to start firing off things right this minute. So, yeah, I mean, there's no point in us in bringing back December 15th, bringing back the identical thing you brought today. We've obviously had discussion on a number of points that we need to follow through on, or at least get further information on. So anyways, Deputy Mayor Alcock, please.
Thank you. Councillor Withy, I just to follow up on this discussion, I guess, again, I kind of concur, because I'll look at the first issue that I raised, and that was the using the human resources capital or reserve fund for the overlap. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I was just raising it as I'm not sure that it's the correct thing to do in light of, and I think there was some recognition from Riva and Julia, and in fact you, Denise, on that. So I guess when you say you're going to come back with the identical budget, if we don't have resolutions, I'm not sure what my resolution would be. I'm not sure what I'd put on the floor. It's really just to say, if you extracted, if you adjusted, made the adjustment, how would that adjust the other side of the ledger? And that would have an impact on maybe some other decisions, right? So I'm not, I don't want to put a motion saying this has got to happen, but I'm kind of hoping that this is the input you were looking for, which would say, all right, we heard these comments, so let's explore a few of them. And again, I something minor like the security item, it was, I don't feel so strongly that I want to say, okay, let's defer it. It was just, I guess maybe the discussion, and I did hear from the clerk, and I think that's a very important viewpoint, so that's helpful. But I almost feel like if by again going back to your comment that this discussion is actually not useful if you intend to come back with the identical budget, regardless of the comments that were made today. So I'm a bit at a quandary here because I'm not sure what motions I'd be putting on the floor.
CEO Corey, response, or Director McKenzie, somebody who's up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with respect to the budget, the senior team has presented a budget that falls within the guidelines that were provided by council. And at this point in time, it's before you for absolutely discussion, recommendation, consideration. So for example, Councillor Deputy Mayor Alcock, if you were looking at your recommendation, if it was in the form of a motion, then you would put a motion on the floor that the senior team be directed to fund those crossover in positions from the levy as opposed to taking from the reserve, or look at alternate funding options. With respect to Mayor Terziano's comment about COLA, if there's some desire for us to bring a budget back in December on the 15th at a reduced COLA amount, we would request a motion of council to be presented, because the direction would have to be at least majority of council that would agree with that. So I'm just giving a few examples on how committee can move these things forward. A conversation is excellent, and it certainly has to take place, and that was the intent of these divisional meetings. But if there's a member of committee that wishes for action to be taken and something changed with the budget that's been presented before you, it would be by way of motion. And that would be, but the majority of council would agree with those decisions. So we're absolutely open to suggestions and recommendations on how we can improve the budget. But it typically through committee structure would be by way of motion.
See, and further to this process, I don't like this process, because if we need everything to be passed by resolution, and I get it that you want the majority of council to agree on something, but in often cases, there's discussions about things that we want to see what it looks like in the overall picture. So you might say, okay, show us a 2.4 and it results in these numbers. And then all of a sudden we go back, okay, well, maybe if we make this change over here, we can put that back up, or whatever we can do. There's no fluidity to this. It's all, the rule book is, this is what we have to have. And it almost makes the discussion we just had almost feel like it was almost useless. But anyway, I digress. I'll go to Mayor Terziano, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will take a stab at a motion if somebody in the clerk's department would draft one, and I would move that, and I will, this isn't part of the motion, but I will preempt preempt it by saying, I appreciate that you guys did come back with a budget within the budget guidelines. I just think some things have changed since we approved those budget guidelines. So I'm going to put a motion on the table that asks staff to go back and reduce the 3.2% tax increase to a 2.5% tax increase. And you can either do that any way you want, or we can go through the budget line by line and give you some suggestions. But right now, you presented an overall budget, very general. Appreciate that. So I'm going to move some very general, a very general response in a motion that says reduce 3.2 to 2.5. And if there's a seconder.
Before we do that, Crystal, you've lit up. You've obviously got a comment on this.
I do, just in regards to procedure. So the motions that are in front of you this week are all to do with each division. The motion that the mayor has just put on the table, should it get a seconder, is actually a motion to reconsider something that committee has already previously adopted. So it's just a little bit different procedurally. My recommendation would be to actually withdraw the motions that have been put on the table today, so that you're not dealing with the motions for each division. And then you would look to reconsider the motion that was passed earlier this year for a reduction in percentage, and then have staff come back with the full budget at that percentage. So just procedurally, that would be my recommendation, but I will leave that with committee.
I certainly am in agreement with leaving the motions today unconsidered. I'm not sure about part 2 of that, but let's, Mayor Terziano, have you got a comment on that?
Just a question to Crystal. I believe the budget motion is to bring a budget in no greater than 4%. So I'm not sure that the budget that staff brought at 3.2, we passed any resolution to accept that, or we didn't give that instruction. We just said no more than 4%. So I'm not sure why a resolution to reduce that would be out of procedure.
Crystal?
If I may, thank you. So the motion is, you're correct, an increase up to 4% from the previous year. But what I'm hearing is that you want that to be reduced to 2.5%. So I'm hearing that your top amount is no longer 4%. You're asking the top amount to be lower. So I'm understanding that you would like to change that, because right now, like you said, staff have followed that motion. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, so a reduction in the top end amount, that's why I would recommend that.
Well, let's think about that. Councillor Weave, in the meantime.
Thank you, Chair Withey. Okay, so now I'm sort of distracted by that last conversation, but my question would have been towards, through you to the mayor, and that would be if within this motion, it would be suitable or okay, acceptable to reduce the levy using more of the reserves, either the, you know what I mean? Like, would it, I know you said you can do it however you want. Would you be okay if staff came back and dipped further into some of the reserves that we have in order to fund this budget, to reduce the levy, but not reduce, or to reduce the tax rate, but not the levy, if that makes sense?
I guess I would guess that any means possible could be used would be the answer to that, but I see Mayor Terziano is taking herself off mute.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just to answer the question, I would not suggest that they go back and just take more out of reserves as the first course. I would suggest that there can be further work, and we might be able to reduce some expenses a bit or increase of revenues a bit. But at the end of the day, if we need more out of reserves, yes, I can support that. But I don't support that as the first turn in the road.
Councillor Weave?
Yeah, just to follow up, I guess what I wanted to get a better understanding of your motion in order to know how I would vote on it. I guess that's where I was going with it.
Good thinking. Councillor Emmer.
Thank you. Two questions. First question is, this morning we passed the draft budget for Operations Protective Services. So that was passed. So I don't know where that stands now, if we're going to start going back. So can someone answer that first?
Who's going there? Is that you, Crystal? You went off and came back.
I would be happy to answer that question. My recommendation would be to actually reconsider that motion from this morning and either defeat it, or you can postpone it until such time as staff have brought a new budget back, essentially. But it would be to reconsider that motion so that it's not still on the books.
So that three consideration takes 2/3, correct?
Correct.
In this case?
Yeah.
Or to defer, I guess that still requires 2/3, or does it, or do we just say I mean, obviously you're hearing that we want this relooked at. What we're getting sort of mired in now is the procedure to get there from here. You've heard what council wants, get us there, please.
Okay.
Hopefully 2/3 one. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And we have, through the clerk and I have taken a look at what we could do procedurally. I would request about a 15-minute recess just to make sure that we have everything clearly. And you as chair, I can send you all of that information so that you have the procedure of what we're going to do. But essentially what I'm hearing then is that you are looking to withdraw the motions that are on the table today, reconsider the motion from this morning so that that is no longer, like I said, on the books. And then you're looking to reconsider the motion that was passed earlier this year for a reduction in the percentage, the top end of the percentage. So that 4%, looking at changing that to 2.5. So that would be a motion to amend what was previously adopted this year. And then staff would come back with that amount at a later date. So if I'm hearing that correctly, that's what we would prepare for you.
I guess my question on that, on what you just said, Crystal, would be about the reconsidering the earlier motion of the year, because I don't know if the mayor said, okay, you're at 5.76 and want to see 2.5 levy increase now. Does that necessarily mean it's now that or below, or just let's see what you can get to and how? And I mean, we're putting up these brackets on everything that's sort of boxing us in here, because there could be any number of different answers to that. It may not, if we put 2.5 and it comes in at 2.7, I mean, 2.7 may be okay. That's kind of where I'm struggling with going all the way back and trashing that motion from the springtime or whenever it was. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely, if I can speak to that. My recommendation might be then, so right now it says up to 4%. So staff did come back with an amount up to 4%. So I think that staff are just looking for direction in what that window is that committee would be comfortable with. So I'm hearing
not as far up to. How about that? Not as far up to 4%. I don't know. Just.
And like I said, if you want to go somewhere, you want to say between 2.4 and 2.7, that we could also do, if you'd like to give a bit more of a window. But I think staff need a little bit of direction on narrowing it down if you're not happy with what's on the table at this time. Again, just my recommendation.
Councillor Stone, welcome.
Thanks. So I do agree with much of what's been said. The process is quite difficult with such a complex budget. You know, it would be wonderful if staff came back with, here's what 2% looks like, here's what 3% looks like, and help us walk us through, you know, where we have some flexibility. My question actually is the question that I asked the other day, the $650,000 in addition, every year on year for 20 years for the asset management plan that we're putting in. Can you tell me what percentage point that would give us? I just want to know how much more we're asking from the levy in order to get that extra 160 or 650,000 this year, for example.
Who's up? Julia?
I will, we'll get that number for you for the 600,000. We do have that. I just wanted to touch on a couple of other things that Councillor Stone just mentioned. Just when we went back to last year and I contacted all the councillors about the budget process, one thing that was really brought up was just the fact that it was felt that there was too much information all given at once. So we did try this process where we were trying to make sure that you guys had ample time to go through it. So we did have the individual budget meetings last week, and we did present the overall budget, so you guys knew where we were sitting at that time and had the questions, that sort of thing. So we just want, we're trying this because it was out of our discussions with all of our councillors, and that was the one main thing that was loud and clear from the majority of you, was that you wanted to have more information. So again, we just really wanted to make sure that you had that and that we would walk through it. So there's that. And then just with the budget guidelines that were passed, we can certainly bring back another variation of the budget. But we really need to know what council's thinking, like if there's specific items in the budget that you want us to look at, because we don't want to waste all of your time by having a whole bunch of budget meetings where we have to keep bringing back, several revisions of the budget with just, minor changes. If we know what the majority of council wants us to look at, so that we can go back and take that back to the team and bring you guys back something that you're really looking for. We just want to make sure that we're clear on what you guys need. So we're not trying to, we think these discussions are great because this is an opportunity for you guys to bring up questions or concerns, that sort of thing. So this is definitely not a waste of time for us. This is what we wanted. So, but we just really need you guys to just tell us, really what you're looking for so that we can come back. We thought the number was 4%. 4% tax increase. That was what was passed. So we did try to bring back a budget that was actually below that. If we cut too much out of 2022, it's going to be really tough for 2023 because we are going to be losing a lot of funding in the 23 budget. So I just wanted to just keep that in mind. And I'm not sure if Reva has the numbers for the 600,000.
Did you, before Reva, Bob, did you have something follow up to that, or are you good?
No. If I'd just like to know if we took 650,000 off the top of this, what does it look like?
Looks like a haircut. Reva.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So Councillor Stone, that was an excellent question. So in order to get just the $645,000 increase, equates to about a 1.3% tax rate change. So it is a big number. That being said, I mean, with our asset management and our capital contributions, we really are looking at that funding gap and trying to set us up for success, not just now, but in the future. So if we reduce that contribution this year, that's absolutely something that we can look at doing and a recommendation that we would be willing to entertain. However, we may not be setting ourselves up for success in the future. It might be 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, but that is something, that the budget working group did discuss, and something that we felt, is a prudent strategy going forward to maintain that increase for this year. With respect to the, the up to 4% tax rate change, budget working group, we did have a lot of discussions around this budget and really wanted to put our best foot forward. And, we did feel we have maintained service levels in this budget. We've maintained our funding to our reserve, not just capital, but also our operating reserves, things like the council chamber expansion, the corporate software, the website reserve, the election reserve. We are maintaining all of those things that over the years have been either council directives or things that council wanted us to bring forward. So we have maintained all of that in this budget. We can certainly entertain recommendations to reduce some of those in order to bring the budget more in line with the 2.5% that's being proposed. So, there are things we can do, but what the budget working group felt was the most prudent way to present the budget was at the current service levels, not reducing anything, maintaining a current and prudent funding strategy going forward for capital and our operating reserves going forward. So we really did try to put our best foot forward with this, and absolutely we're more than willing to entertain recommendations of council for changes.
Yeah, let's not forget our $20 million in reserves. Anyway, Councillor Weed, please.
You know what? I think I'm gonna withdraw. I'll pass. Thanks.
Okay, Mayor Terziano, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to Crystal's comment. I don't believe we're changing the resolution we passed where we said budget guidelines were up to 4%. Staff brought back 3.2. My motion is to reduce it. I'm not changing the budget guidelines. 2.5 is still within the budget guidelines. So I don't know why we have to go back and change our budget guidelines. I'm just saying you brought me 3.2. Thank you very much. I can't support it. It's too high. Our taxpayers are going to have a tough year. We have a huge increase coming at district. We've had a huge increase at solid waste. We've had water and sewer. I think we need, I know we don't control those at this table, but they're all pieces that our residents are going to have to pay this year. So I think if we can get that 3.2% increase down a little bit, we do it. And if we have to do it through some capital, maybe sometimes we hit a crunch where we have to actually do something that might affect us down the road 10 years. But as somebody pointed out a little while ago, 10 years is a long time from now. You know, I just think we can do better. And so I'm putting a resolution on the table that says reduce that number from 3.2.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Alcock, do you guys need a 10-minute break?
Mr. Chairman, if I could kindly respect a 10-minute break, because I do need to confirm with the clerk's department that we're following proper procedure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just before that, Councillor Armour, did you have something to jump in on quickly?
Yeah, just a quick question for the mayor. I'm just wondering, 2.5, are you stuck with the 2.5? Or are you saying something below 3? Is that what you're asking? Just so I know what I'm voting on.
Yeah, you know what, I'm asking for something around 2.5. I believe we can get there through different ways. And I believe that's more manageable for the taxpayer. If it comes in at 2.61, it's 2.61. If it comes in at, 2.7, then we vote on 2.7. But no, I'm not saying just get it below 3. I'm saying shoot for something around 2.5.
Okay, let's reconvene at 2:50. Okay, see you then.
You're not muted.
Still waiting for a couple. Still got a minute, according to my clock. Oh, just turned to 2:50. Here we are. Waiting Councillor Thompson. Councillor Fitzgerald. Give them a sec. There's Councillor Thompson. Councillor Fitzgerald. Paging Councillor Fitzgerald. Well, let's just carry on. Hopefully, Councillor Fitzgerald will jump in a second. Over to you. You've got something, Denise?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just a summary of the discussions that have occurred with staff. So just to recap, what we're hearing today at committee is that there was no desire for the exact same budget that was presented today to come back to December 15th. In order to bring a different budget back, we do need direction from committee. So typically that would be direction through a motion of committee, which obviously is majority of committee to vote on those decisions. With respect to the change in the tax rate, with respect to the budget guidelines, I would request that the deputy clerk speak to that matter just to provide clarification on why we have to follow a certain process, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair Withey. In regards to the motion, so the motion that was passed earlier this year was that committee directed staff to prepare the town consolidated 2022 draft budget with the tax supported operating and capital net tax rate increase up to 4% over the prior year. As the consolidated budget has not come forward at this time, if committee is looking to adjust that amount, and I'm hearing that you're looking for a reduction in that amount, then you are amending something that has been previously adopted, and therefore the motion will require a 2/3 vote. I do have that prepared if you'd like to see that motion. However, kind of prior to that, I would just recommend if you wanted to go down that route, to just table the motion that's on the floor right now, Chair Withey.
Okay, I don't want to have a protracted debate with you, Crystal, but where it says up to before, I don't know how this is in contravention of that, because it didn't say.
So if I may,
Yeah.
Staff have done that. If you are looking for something different at this point, staff need direction to do that. So yes, it is up to 4%, which staff have done. If you would like something different coming to the 15th, we need direction to do that.
Okay, so let's begin by tabling the motion that is on the floor. Do I need a mover and seconder to do that? Councillor, sorry?
Yes, you're correct. A mover and seconder. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Wiebe and Councillor Stone. You're not writing anything up? We just.
Nope, just
moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Stone. We hereby table the motion. Do I have to read that motion?
Nope.
Table the motion that was read at the start of this meeting. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? You got what, 5? You're not in favor? All those opposed? Oh, sorry, Dion, you're way down in my boxes there. I don't know how. Move yourself up. Okay, so that passed. Okay, so Councillor Wiebe.
Thanks, Chair Withey. So I guess what I'm trying to crystallize what I'm hearing, and that is that we asked for budget guidelines. Staff brought them in. Some of us may not be totally thrilled with what we've done to get there, but and I don't know if I'm completely in agreement with everything in the budget either. I'm not sure I'm not sure about a motion to drop the number back to 2.5. I don't think I can support that, because I don't, to some of the early comments, I don't know exactly how we get there or what that looks like. And 2.9 might be something I'm okay with. 2.8, I'm not sure, right? I'm wondering, again, I'll kind of press back towards the mayor on it. Do you think that the lion's share of the budget reduction could come through the 3.1 COLA issue? Like, is that the main sticking point? Because I'd like to get to I'd like to get my head around where it is we're looking to make some of these changes to get to a number we're all happy with.
So, I mean, the way I sort of take it at the 2.5 is it's almost like just, to my mind, it's throwing a dart. Let's see what you can do better, whether it's 2.6 or 2.4. That's why I struggle with having to bring forward the motion that has that exact number in it. We want to see better. The original motion said up to. You guys said, yeah, okay, we solved that. We were up to. We were under the 4. We're good. You know, everybody be happy and pass it. Well, obviously that's not the case. So whether it's I agree with you, Jonathan. Whether it's 2.6 or 7 or, I mean, there's lots of options on how to get there. It's a complicated budget. It's a big document. But that's the difficulty where we start having to peg something specific. Anyway, Councillor or Mayor Terziano, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I could revise my motion to not maybe go to 2.5, but where I have a concern is last year we increased the levy by $340,000. This year we're increasing it by $980,000. That's just about 3 times the amount of 21. And in 21, we finished with a $900,000 surplus. So I just feel like if we overtax again this year and finish with another surplus, I guess I just wouldn't necessarily sleep well with those numbers. So, maybe what I'm looking for is to shave a few points off that 3.2%. And for me personally, I just can't support 3.2% based on where we've been in this last year, where we finished it, and what's before us now. So I want to see us go back to the drawing board and shave a little bit off. Maybe it doesn't go to 2.5, but I'm just not sure we're at the best number we can get to now. So.
Okay, I got yellow hands appearing and disappearing. I guess Councillor Armour, you're off. Riva, you're off. Denise, are you responding to the mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was just going to suggest that I hear a lot of percentages being discussed around the screen, that perhaps it's just a change to come back with a budget not to a maximum of 4%. Maybe its committee they would be looking at 2.7% or 3% if that's what committee is interested in changing their decision on the budget guidelines. That absolutely is something that senior staff are willing to give a try and see.
So only if you're coming under that number, though. That's the deal. Councillor Thompson, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair, and I would agree with you with the comment with regard to targeting a percentage. I know when I was first on council decades ago that was the norm in those days. We'd the mayor and the chair of finance would set a figure, and then we'd work towards that. And I think it resulted in some pretty artistic finagling down the road type of thing. But anyway, I agree with you that that is not the way to go. What does concern me with all of this discussion is the fact that staff did come back with a budget within the parameters that we established for them way back when. And not only that, did they come in within those parameters, they came in with less than what was suggested. We've heard from Riva in this discussion that not only have they come in under the guidelines that were set, but also we're maintaining the level of service, okay, that we've had here. And the one thing that I know after all these years on council is constituents do not mind, okay, an increase in their taxes as long as they're getting the service. If they see the service, they don't mind paying for it. We see that time after time after time, and that is indisputable. I don't know where, with the odd occasion or the odd exception, I guess, you'll get someone that'll complain about, you know, the tax increase to everything. But it's the level of service that counts here. And we've done that in public works over the last 7 years, and we're looking at, you know, getting to that point where we are at a sustainable level with public works, with the budget that has been presented. So I'm really having trouble with any kind of discussion at all about reducing things here, reducing things there. I think we've been presented with a very fair budget, a very fair consideration by staff. They've done everything we've asked them to do. And now here it is, the ninth inning, and we're asking to change the rules, change the game. So I'm just having trouble with this discussion, Mr. Chair. I think, quite frankly, I'm very happy with 3.2, and I would hope that the majority of council would agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I take your comments. I don't know that we're in the ninth inning. We do have plenty of time to pass this budget. But I'll go to, well, unless Deputy Treasurer has a reply to that, is that what you're doing, Riva?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, to thank you, Councillor Thompson, for those comments. And to your point, I just wanted to point out that on page 6 of the Corporate Services staff report, at the bottom, there is an impact to the taxpayer summary. So you can see in the town of Huntsville, this 3.2% tax rate change equates to about a $38 difference in an assessment of a $300,000 home. So just to put kind of a monetary impact to a taxpayer, it equates to about $38 for the year for the town of Huntsville taxes.
Yeah, I mean, I get when you throw those numbers out, but $38 means a lot to different people, and that you can, anyway. Councillor Stone, please.
Thanks. You know, I really appreciate Councillor Thompson's comments. And I agree a lot with it. However, I don't know if this is the year for us to push a little bit more. But the one thing I would love to see is some real suggestions from staff. You know, it's hard for us to dig down into this budget when it's so vast. But if staff came to us and said, "Okay, well, if you want to shave, you know, 0.5% off, then you can't buy that dump truck this year," whatever it might be. But bring us a handful of some real plausible suggestions. And I will, if we really want to bring that number down, another suggestion would be maybe we don't put 650,000 this year into the asset management. I know we're putting we need to get on top of this. However, maybe this isn't the year for the whole 650,000, but some real suggestions from staff would make our lives so much easier.
Thank you, Councillor. So maybe it's you know, half of the Uponor rent doesn't go into a reserve, you know, only part of it or something along those lines. I get it. Deputy Mayor Alcock, please.
Thank you, Councillor Withey. It's following up. I too appreciate, Councillor Thompson, your comment, and I certainly am the last person. I really take to heart something about affecting service, and I guess though I look at this and say, to me, this is what the whole budget discussion is all about. You know, we've had the individual departmental discussions. And maybe I should have sat in all of them, and I didn't. So I'm seeing all of the budget together, and it raises questions, and I think, and that's part of what we do on council. We're supposed to ask questions, and that's what, indeed, I respect our staff because they've asked us to ask questions. And so, yes, we did set that guideline. And but now that we're actually starting to get into the meat of it, it begs the question to Councillor Stone's comment about, well, maybe this isn't the year to do X, or maybe we do 50% of X instead of 100%. And if we do that, then that would bring down the percentage increase by so-and-so. And that might be more palatable to meet, you know, Mayor Terziano's concerns. And I think what we're doing today is really healthy. It's not second guessing staff. To your point, Councillor Thompson, I think staff have done a great job. But I do think that the exchange is important. Otherwise, you know, I just think it's really important. So, and I don't know how I would feel if it comes back and we go to 2.7 and it means that we drastically reduce services. I probably wouldn't support that budget then. But I would like to see what efforts, what ways we could be creative, to Councillor Stone's point, to try and bring the percentage down a bit, that it is more palatable for a lot of people, as was alluded to, that might be actually struggling next year. And so any effort we make as a council, I think is not a bad thing. And I you know, I'll agree to Councillor Withey, your point. I don't think this is the ninth inning. I think this is part of the process that we're going through. So I don't have a problem with it.
Thank you. Couple of newcomers. Welcome, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Withey. I didn't feel that I had anything important to say previously. Just
well, that's good. Okay, Councillor Schumacher.
Enjoying all the comments and taking it all in. I think staff's done an excellent job. They did exactly what we asked them to do in the first place, and I appreciated Councillor Thompson's remarks regarding that, and as well as Deputy Mayor Alcock's. I guess the thing that puzzles me is that we're asking staff to decide that are probably decisions that we should be making as council about what should come in and what should go out. And the thing that I guess I'm apprehensive about is, if we do decide these things, you know, what is the taxpayer's reaction to that? So if we cancel a project, or we cancel a truck, and we cancel some programming, you know, maybe it's level of service that suffers, maybe it's sport and recreation, maybe it's something at the library, we don't know. But I don't think it's fair for us to put the onus on staff to make that decision. That's our decision to make. I do like the fact that we can associate numbers to capital projects or levels of service, and they should, by all means, maybe provide that information to us. And then I believe the decision is ours to make, not staff's. So they've done a great job providing us with the budget we asked them to provide us with. And I don't think it's fair for them to ask them to make those decisions. Provide us with the information only. That's it.
Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through here with me. Yeah, I agree. Staff have come in at the budget that we had asked them to, or below budget that we'd asked them to. And so, yeah, I agree a lot with what Councillor Thompson said. And again, a lot with what Councillor Deputy Mayor Alcock said. I wouldn't want to see a budget that reduces services, but we're also we're asking taxpayers with this budget to pay more for the exact same level of services. So we're not increasing services, we're definitely not decreasing services, which is great, but we're asking people to pay more. I get there's cost of living, I get that, but as the mayor alluded to, we had a surplus, and then we're going to ask taxpayers to pay more. And if there's a surplus again, do we give that money back to the taxpayer? No, it just goes into whatever. I agree with Councillor Fitzgerald. I mean, we are the ones to make the decision, but I do like what Mayor Terziano and some have suggested is that staff make some recommendations in the change to maybe come back between the 2.5, the 2.7, the 2.9. At the end of the day, we're the ones who are going to make those decisions, but give us some parameters that, yeah, as Councillor Stone said, if we don't put this much in, what does that look like? You know, if we take half of the Uponor, if we do COLA at 2.4%, these are suggestions that we're making because they're the ones that we kind of know about. You guys have your finger on the pulse, give us those suggestions, and then we'll take them as council and we'll say, okay, we're going to go with A, B, and C to get to the numbers that we want. Those are my comments.
Great, thank you. Mayor Terziano, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just for the record, before I say what I was going to say, is Uponor money is not on the table to take for anything. We have a resolution that strictly puts that away. That said, and listen, I appreciate all the work staff has done in this budget, and it's fine for us to say they have brought us back a budget within the budget guidelines, but they brought us back a budget at 3.2% increase, plus an additional $770,000 in external funding, which is another 3% increase. So you could challenge whether or not this really is a 3.2% budget. It's 3.2% on the levy. It's about a 6% increase in spending. So, I mean, I don't feel that it's bad for us to look at this and try to shave a little something off. And I don't think it has to be as a cut to services. I mean, Councillor Thompson talks about that we're providing a great public works department and so taxpayers are happy to pay for it. Well, we've put $2.4 million extra money in public works in the last 8 years, above and beyond our capital asset contributions, above and beyond all of the operational costs. So they should be providing a great level of service and the community should be happy. But it doesn't mean that we've got to get that budget in itself to about $20 million. You know, we've got to work within our means, and not everybody in the community has the same means. So, you know, somebody doesn't really, there are people out there who don't really care how many programs we offer or how many of this. They're just trying to stay off food stamps. So we have to realize that we've got, you know, members of the community that we represent that might struggle, and the $38 might be a lot if they even have a $300,000 house. So, I just think we can go back to the drawing board. And if we have to reduce some of our capital asset contribution for a year, so be it. We're in the third year of COVID.
Great, thanks. Since we're getting close to wrapping this up in some sort of resolution, but we'll first go to Councillor Thompson again, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair Withy. Yeah, with regards to the $38 increase on a $300,000 assessment, the $38 that would have the people that would be affected by the $38 probably are not looking at a $300,000 assessment in the first place, if they're looking at an assessment at all. So I mean, the $38 is going to be definitely towards people that can afford the $38. So I mean, that argument just doesn't wash with me at all, type of thing. And as far as the suggestion of cutting back on the contribution to capital at Public Works, just remember one thing, okay? The plan was over 8 years, and we've stuck to it, and we are now within sustainability. The range of sustainability with that, and that's it. Once we're there, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. Any increases in Public Works after that would be maybe subjected to cost of living or something like that. But by no means is it time to start cutting back on a plan that we've put forward, worked on for 7 years, and has been successful. because we're just now that close to being where we wanted to be when we initiated this 7 years ago. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald, please.
Thank you, Chair Withey. There was some discussion earlier about the surplus and, you know, what's going to happen if we have another surplus. And Reba, I don't know if it's too much to put together to answer this, but certainly if we could have it for our next round of budget discussions. How much of that surplus can we attribute to COVID transfers from the government and a decrease in operating costs related to COVID? So I don't know if you've done that work already, or you could have it for us next time around, but I would love to know.
Okay, you're going to say something? Are you going to say
sorry.
something?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, Councillor Fitzgerald, are you talking about the 2021 surplus that was brought forward in the Q3 forecast? Yeah.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Okay. I do have that number. So I'm just bringing up my notes here. Sorry, just bear with me. My computer is not as quick as I am.
It's a pretty slow computer.
Oh. Okay, so with respect to the Q3 forecasted surplus, specifically as a result of COVID, we're looking at about $420,000. So that's all the COVID funding and lost revenue offset by, you know, cost mitigating strategies. So, you know, about 420,000 of that $965,000 surplus that was presented last week relates specifically to COVID. You know, and then there were, you know, staff vacancies and that kind of thing that were all part of the presentation last week as well.
Okay, so are we wanting to entertain a new resolution to look at a new up to number? Nobody? Yeah, I kind of, okay. Councillor Stone?
Oh, well, again, I would like, I don't need a resolution to hit a particular number, but I would like suggestions from staff as to how we can reduce our expenditures.
I don't know if that's I don't know if that can be a motion though, can it? Don't we need something more defined? Mayor Terziano, did you have something in mind?
I thought we had a resolution on the floor actually, so maybe just clarity first on that.
Did we? We did? Crystal, what was that, the 2.5 one?
Yes, we currently have a motion on the floor that changes it from an increase up to 4% for an increase up to 2.5%. So unless the mover and seconder would like to withdraw that to change it, that's what's on the floor at this time.
Mr. Chair, that was not my motion to cap it at 2.5%. So,
okay.
So if I would.
So is that recorded in error? It was the mayor the mover?
Yes, so if the mayor is not on board with that, then we will withdraw that motion. I would recommend withdrawing that motion.
Okay, she's saying that wasn't the motion in the first place. What was your motion?
I had moved to ask staff to bring back a budget number of 2.5, not up to 2.5, not striking budget guidelines. And then when we came back, I said I would modify that to bring it down somewhat, shooting in that area. But you know, as we talked, if it's 2.7, it's 2.7. If it's, I think I made it clear that I'm just not supporting 3.2. So I've asked for them to come back with a reduction. And if council doesn't support that, then that's fine. And I think we'd probably beat it to death. Maybe we should just call the question.
Okay, so Crystal, comment on that.
Sorry, just on that, if you'd like me to bring it up, then perhaps you could clarify the wording if I don't have that correctly. Unless, again, you are looking to withdraw that motion, but I would just recommend bringing it up and you can tell me exactly what you would like to see in that motion.
Do you have a different wording, Mary Terziano? Do you want to look at that, what she had down there, or do you just want to scrap that? And I'm sensing that there's an issue with saying, make it better. Staff want us to throw that dart and say, this is the number, or up to number, something like that. I'm not getting much clarity here as what is the best approach for this. Crystal.
Thank you. So just to try and provide a little bit of clarification. So at this time for the meetings that were happening today and Wednesday of this week, the budget was broken into each division. There was a motion to have that division have that division's budget go forward into the consolidated budget. However, at this time, there is no consolidated budget. So that is why we're looking at if you want a change to the overall consolidated budget, that hasn't come forward yet, which is why we would need to amend the motion as previously adopted. In regards to just saying, we want something to be better, staff just need some direction on how to change what they currently have, because they are following council's direction at this time, because they're following the motion that's already been passed. So if you're looking to change that, you're looking for it to be better, you're looking for it to be below the 3.2%, then staff just need direction to do that. However, whatever number you would want to see in there, you can put in there, but at this time, staff don't have any direction to do anything else.
I guess I still struggle with this, and I, again, don't want to beat this to death, but the original motion said up to. So they hit a number that was under the 4. It still follows that less than 3.2 is still up to 4, still satisfies that original motion. I don't know if we just say, okay, we're looking for options to reduce that number because 3.2 isn't the number some or all of us don't want. Then we get into this thing where now we're back to the beginning where CAO Corey said, well, now we want it with specific things you want us to do. So I still think that the up to 4 could still be up to less than 3.2 and still satisfy the motion. We're getting into the circular argument here that isn't going anywhere productive. So I don't know, I'm grasping here. Sorry, Crystal, again.
Sorry, what you said there is correct. If you would like to leave it as the up to 4, but provide some direction as to what you would like staff to go back and take a look at to change, you could absolutely do that. That's of course a possibility, but I think what staff are needing at this point is just some direction in what you would like them to look at.
We would like them to look at making it less. CAO Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there has been a lot of great conversation, and that was the intent of the meeting today. And what I am hearing from various members of committee is that you would like to see the senior team come back with potential options for reducing the budget. So maybe we're getting too hung up on the percentage right now. And maybe the resolution that should, or the motion that should be considered today is that the senior team bring back potential options for reduction just across the board in various areas, whether that's a reduction to capital contribution, maybe it's a reallocation of things such as Lakeland dividends, maybe it's a recommendation of transferring projects from one year to the next. Perhaps that's what they're bringing forward, but I think we're getting too hung up on the number right now, and I'm not so sure if my senior team is going to hang me to dry over this recommendation, but maybe that is what the motion should say. The senior team be directed to bring back potential options for reducing the budget further.
Now, if you just said that an hour and a half ago.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it was a great conversation. I think it was important to hear from all members of committee because I hear varying opinions. And again, I'm not sure how my senior team feels about me throwing that out there, but as your CAO, I would feel comfortable if that direction was given, and we will go back and have some conversation.
Okay, mover and seconder. Karen and Nancy, sorry, Mayor and Deputy Mayor. Any further, oh, no further discussion, please, but I have to ask. All right, all in favor? See those hands? What do we got? 1, 2, 3, okay, we're good. Passed, carried, thank you. Phew, so is that it for us? Do you have a, need a motion? Sorry?
I think now it's back to me.
Oh, right.
Hang on. Yeah. So
Gladly.
Under new business, we still have the development services portion. Would we be doing that still, or would we be? What makes the most sense here now going forward?
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the meeting still should take place because the intent of these divisional meetings is to have a discussion divisionally, focus divisionally on the budgets, ask questions about the divisional budgets. So I still think that that meeting should take place. And in that time, I can converse with my senior team and perhaps we can discuss a bit further on how we proceed with the December 15th meeting.
Okay, then I will at this time turn the chair over to Deputy Mayor Alcott for the development services portion of the meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. So we have moved on to agenda item number 4 under development services, and I do have a motion which I will read, and then I can turn that over to Reba for presentation. Is that okay with you, Reba? Do I go like that? All right, so I have a motion moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that the draft 2022 Development Services Operating Budget as attached to Report Corp 2021-86 be included in the Town Draft 2022 Consolidated Budget for consideration. And with that, I am going to turn it over to our very capable Deputy Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation again. So can you see my screen? Yeah, okay. So after such a great discussion in corporate services, we are now going to review the development services draft 2022 divisional budget. So again, this divisional budget is put forward by the budget working group, which consists of the senior management team and myself. So the initial budget submission was prepared by the development services leadership team and their staff. And again, I think they did an excellent job of budgeting for what they need to maintain the service levels throughout the division. So, you know, a huge thank you goes out to Director Maxwell and her staff for all of the hard work that they put into putting this budget together. So I've already gone through this a couple times today, so I'm not going to spend any time on this slide at this point. So the total proposed development services divisional budget is actually seeing a net levy reduction of about $2,200. So this is entirely in the operating fund. So I do think, again, it's really important to note that there are no service level changes proposed in 2022. So this means that there's no increased service levels, but there's no service reductions either. So some significant changes across development services as a division. There were a number of salary, wages, and benefits changes that impact the levy in 2022. So things like the staff COLA increase, and which includes the statutory benefits and the employee benefit changes, those increases equate to about $61,000. So also in 2021, there was a new planning technician position that was approved throughout the year. So that position has now been included in the 2022 budget. It was not included in the 2021 budget. So that equates to about a $76,000 increase. There was also the removal of some additional administrative support. So in 2021, this additional support was budgeted for a 9-month period. And it's not budgeted at all in 2022 for this additional support. So that's actually a reduction overall in the SWB of about $34,000 with respect to this. There's also the addition of a 3-month, the extension of the GIS contract position up to the end of March 2022. So this position is funded 50% through the levy and 50% through the building department. There were also a number of SWB changes that do not impact the levy in 2022. So there, in the staffing budget report that was brought forward in September, there was the addition of a property standards inspector position. And again, that was previously presented to committee. So this position relates entirely to the building department, which is self-funded, so it doesn't have a net levy impact. There's also the addition of the short-term rental financial administrator position. And again, this was also previously presented to committee back in September. So this position is proposed to be funded first through any short-term rental licensing surplus, and then through the short-term rental MAT reserve. So there is anticipated to be a surplus in that short-term rental licensing program. And this surplus is actually in excess of the position cost. So it is anticipated that this position will be fully funded through that short-term rental licensing program reserve. There's also the removal of the 2021 one-time streetscape ambassador position. This position was fully funded through the Human Capital Reserve last year. So the removal of the position doesn't have a net levy impact. Last year it was in the budget for about $30,000. So overall in your SWB line within the development services budget, that SWB line is being reduced by $30,000. There was also in the 2021 budget that GIS contract, the GIS technician contract position was included for a 9-month period in the 2021 budget. This position was fully funded, 50% through the building department, and then the other 50% that was in planning was funded through various planning reserves. So overall, that reduced the SWB line by about $49,000. But then again, we've added back the 3-month GIS technician contract extension. So it's just kind of a timing difference. There's a 6-month timing difference for that position. And again, you know, there's the other 50% of the GIS contract position for 2022. 50% of that position is funded through the building department. So that piece of it doesn't have a net levy impact. There's also an increase anticipated in planning department revenues of approximately $57,000. Legal fees within development services have also increased by about $55,000. So this is broken down between a couple of different budget sheets. So there's $5,000 related to any short-term rental licensing dispute, and that's a levy funded amount. There's also $50,000 related to LPAT costs. So this is anticipated to be funded through the LPAT reserve. The building department has seen an overall reduction in contractor costs. So this includes a couple of things. There was a reduction in scanning costs of about $10,000. And that's partially offset by the eSolutions costing increase of about $7,000. So overall, there's a reduction of about $3,000 in that line item. So as part of the annual allocation process for the building department costs, it was noted that merchant fees related to the building department, so the fact that the building department does accept payments at the second floor counter through credit cards, debit cards, that kind of thing, that had not been previously funded by the building department. So as such, we did an analysis of the merchant costs related to the building department payments that we receive. So as a result of that, an additional $11,000 has been included in the building department budget. So that's to cover credit card charges, debit card charges, all of those charges that the town, you know, is required to pay in order to accept those types of payments. And those are specific to building department payments that are received throughout the year. So overall, these costs are expected to increase organizationally because we are using more online payments, online forms for things. However, these costs would have previously been budgeted in the finance department. So the allocation of a portion of these merchant fees costs to the building department has helped to reduce the 2022 levy overall. There is an additional approximately $60,000 that has been allocated to the building department outside of the merchant fees. So this is largely the result of an increase in insurance premiums, but also includes an allocation of IT, capital, and operating costs, which had not been previously done in the past. So I spoke to this a little bit earlier in our legislative services discussion. You know, the building department does benefit from the use of our IT infrastructure and the computers and the monitors and the printers and all of that sort of thing. So these allocations do help to reduce the levy overall and ensure that the building department really is funding the costs organizationally that they benefit from. So in 2021, in the marketing department, there was a one-time PDF accessibility remediation project. This was included for $30,000 and was funded through the website reserve. So this project is not included in 2022. And since it was fully funded in 2021, there is no net levy impact in the current year 2022 budget. So with the MAT budgets, the majority of costs relate to one-time projects from year to year. So it's very difficult to follow, you know, what exactly is in that budget. So I'd like to look through those specific MAT projects separately. So in the general MAT program, so this is the hotel and motel tax that's taken in. We are anticipating revenues of about $700,000 in 2022 and collection fees related to that of $7,000. So there is a contribution to the MAT board, and this is net of the collection fees of $7,000 and the chamber marketing our communities amount, that $50,000 provided. So that's kind of taken off the top, and then we allocate 70% to the MAT board. So the projects, you know, that are funded through the 30% of the town's portion for 2022 include the streetscape marketing and signage for about $8,000. There's the CAMA conference promotion. So Huntsville will be hosting the 2023 CAMA conference. So this is $2,000 to help promote that. There's also the skating rink that was previously approved by committee for about $22,000. And these are specifically the 2022 costs that were included in that committee report. There's also the MHP video and photography for $11,000. There is wayfinding included in this budget for $60,000 to be funded through the MAT. Then there's our annual costs that we pay out of the MAT. So there's the Huntsville Lake-Base Chamber, the Visitor Information Services for $32,000. There's the Port Sydney and Utterson Chamber contribution for $5,000. There's also a business retention and expansion program. And this was in 2021 was included at $10,000, and we have increased this to $15,000 for 2022. And lastly, but certainly not least, is the Huntsville Job Fair for $1,000. So those are all of the projects that are to be funded out of the 30% town portion of that MAT. So I do think it's important to note that there is an anticipated surplus in this budget of about $87,000 that will go into the general MAT reserve. So with respect to the short-term rental MAT, we are anticipating revenues of about $240,000. Through this, there's that short-term rental financial administrator position that I discussed earlier of about $30,000. There will be collection fees for the first few months of the year based on our current contract of about $3,000. So the only project specifically funded through the short-term rental MAT funds is the community improvement program. So I had mentioned earlier today in our financial services discussion that this was a council initiative in 2021 and you know, a very important program. And we wanted to maintain that program, but not have it funded through the levy. So this program has been moved to the short-term rental MAT to be funded entirely through that. So that has reduced the overall levy by about $45,000. So I do think that it is really important to note that there is an anticipated surplus in this budget of about $192,000 that will go into a short-term rental MAP reserve. So with respect to the funding for this division, so divisionally, there's spending of about $4.4 million, just under $4 million anticipated in 2022. So these costs include contributions to various reserves of just under 420,000. And you know, I can go into detail about that a little later. So, you know, a large portion of this is funded through the levy, about $1 million of this $4 million spend. But there are some other specific funding sources that I think should be noted. So with respect to revenues, we are anticipating about $1.7 million in revenues. So that includes planning revenues, building revenues, you know, our MAT, all of that stuff. And actually, sorry, it doesn't include the MAT. The MAT is further down. Our MAT revenues are about $940,000 in addition to the 1.7. So the other kind of funding sources we're looking at are through various reserves. So because the building department is self-funded, any surplus or deficit runs through that reserve. And there are, you know, significant increases to our allocations to the building department. Excuse me, the community branding project has been carried forward from previous years, and that's included in the economic development, budget of about $20,000. So the funding for this project was put into a dedicated reserve in a prior year. So it's proposed to be to use this reserve to fund that project. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, there are anticipated LPAT legal costs of about $50,000 included in the 2022 budget. So these are proposed to be funded through the LPAT reserve. The planning and project reserve is proposed to fund the secondary plan project. And again, this is a carry forward project from 2021 that was anticipated to be funded through that reserve. So this has not changed in the 2021 budget. We've maintained that. And then the short-term rental licensing program reserve is again proposed to fund that short-term rental financial administrator position that's included in the short-term rental MAP budget that I just went through. So that's for about $30,000. So as I mentioned earlier, the contributions to reserves are just under about $420,000. So this includes a number of things. So the IT capital contribution is about $2,400. So that's coming from the building department's usage of computers and printers and monitors and kind of their usage of that cost. Then there's also a contribution to the LPAT reserve of $50,000. And that's been, you know, an annual thing. There's also a planning and projects contribution of $10,000, putting $10,000 into that reserve. The short-term rental licensing program, we're expecting a surplus of about just under $34,000. So that will mostly be used to fund the short-term rental financial administrator position, but that is a contribution into that reserve as well. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a general MAT surplus of about $87,000 that we're expecting to go into that general MAT reserve, and $192,000 to go into the short-term rental MAT reserve. The only other contribution, and it's an annual thing, is the website contribution. So for 2022, this contribution is $45,000. So that all of those things kind of go to make up that 420 contribution to the reserves. So with respect to capital, any capital project spending has been included in Appendix B to the staff report. And for development services, there's one project and it amounts to $15,000. The entire amount is anticipated to be funded through the Economic Development Capital Reserve. So the net levy contribution to this capital reserve totals $5,000 for 2022, and there was no change between 21 and 22 for those contributions. So that has not gone towards, impacting or increasing the levy in 2022. That's everything I had for development services. I'm available for questions.
Okay, thanks so much for Great presentation, Reba. I do notice Councillor Weeb is off the mark. There we go. Over to you, Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Alcock. I have two questions. The first is, it was my understanding that the MAT reserve fund from the short-term rentals was basically to be dedicated towards affordable housing. Correct me if I'm wrong, and or if not, how do we do that? Because it strikes me that we don't seem to have readily available levers to do affordable housing projects.
I think who would like to tackle that, Reba or Director McKenzie, maybe? I think that I noticed you've taken your mute off, so that's a good sign.
I was actually going to call on Director Maxwell to pop
Okay,
into-
all right, thanks, sorry. Director Maxwell, where are you? Right there she is. All right, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. We did update the financial policy for the MAT reserve money and did note that specifically the short-term rental money could be also used for affordable housing projects. So I believe that is the plan moving forward when we have projects and anything that we would be doing, that would be where we would fund it from moving forwards.
So it's easily accessible. If a project should come up, we don't have to go over all sorts of hurdles, through hurdles and that sort of thing.
That's correct.
All right.
Can I my second?
Yes, of course.
Okay, my second question is, I see our premier basically campaigning on the one of his ideas of speeding up development, speeding up the approval process for having houses constructed. In your opinion, I guess, Kirsten, how are we positioned right now in terms of turnover time or turnaround time for building permits and developments, et cetera? How would you say we're faring at this point, and or how much room for improvement would we have?
Director Maxwell.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I think we're well positioned moving forward. We, with the changes that have happened with the building department processing of applications using their online software, that's I think helped things pretty significantly. We do have a significant number of properties that are ready for development once they finish their subdivision agreements and things like that. So I think we're well positioned, and the community planning permit as well will make a significant difference in how that works too. All of the initiatives we've been working on for the last few years have all been in the hopes of making things smoother and faster at our end.
Great. And if I may, I don't think the Premier has announced actually how he would direct municipalities to speed it up. I think it's one of those, it's a good headline, but I'm not quite sure how he wants to achieve it. I appreciate your response, Director Maxwell. All right, I think Mayor Terziano, you were next, followed by Councillor Schumacher.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to actually follow up on Councillor Weeb's question about the short-term rental. A couple of meetings ago at the MAT board, when they agreed that the town could be the recipient of 100% of the short-term rental funds. One of the things they were asking, and I couldn't answer yet because it's something we still have to do, and that is what percentage of the short-term rental money, or how much off the top of the short-term rental money, is to go to affordable housing. So we have to have a report with some options on that, so that we can direct, like all of the short-term rental money won't go to affordable housing, but we need to direct a certain percentage of it to the affordable housing reserve. And we need that to come back for a council decision pretty quick, I think, too.
That's great. Thank you for that input. That's great. Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Chair Alcock. So Reba, I noticed in the presentation, or I don't know what it was, the subsection B or whatever, so the wayfinding, the $60,000 for the MAT, It says one-time funding. So is that all we're putting in for wayfinding? Because I guess my question is, and I'm new, so this is new for me. We've just done a consultant's report and they came on October 27th and did a whole presentation on the total cost is going to be $708,000. And I realize we're not going to do that all in 1 year. They talked 3 phases, but is that 60,000 just one time and that's the part we're tackling, or does it come back up every year through MAT board? What is our options to complete the wayfinding?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Councillor Schumacher. Indeed, it was a great discussion we had at our meeting about that. So who can I ask to respond to that one? Because I think Director Maxwell, look at you.
I'll take that one. We put 60,000 into the budget for this year. We do have to come back and report to council on what we would recommend the first steps to be, the first locations for signage. And we will do that in conjunction with the community branding project, because we need to know what the signs look like before we go too much further. But for the first year, we were suggesting we would put 60,000 in, and then in subsequent years, we can allocate whatever council thinks they want to spend for each different wayfinding section moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'm happy to hear that you guys are coming forward with some suggestions that we can move forward on a great document.
And if I'm right, I think we're also applying for some grant applications to implement part of that. Is that correct? No, Director Maxwell?
If there are grants available, we would absolutely apply for them.
All right, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Through you to Reva. Reva, with regards to the $50,000 to LPAT, do we have a reserve for that, or how often have we actually used money set aside for LPAT? Because it seems to me that we have I think last year it was maybe an exception with Kirsten's involvement, but it seems we have a sort of a past history of not getting involved in LPAT, and I'm just wondering, do we have a lot of money in that particular bank account, or what?
Reva, did you want to respond, or can I go back to Director Maxwell? Go back to Director Maxwell.
Thank you. I don't know the exact level of the reserve at this time, but council has committed to participating in an upcoming appeal next year as well. So that's where that 50,000 is being budgeted for at this time.
And it is quite a significant appeal. So, will, I'm sure, to Director Maxwell's point, require a lot of staff time as well as legal advice. Okay, are there any other questions? Councillor Withey.
Haha. Thought I'd let you off the hook.
Not a chance. Don't worry.
Yeah, quickly, just where did I find this here? There was a section here. We scrolled past it. Now I'm not going to find it very quickly. About the building to offset something in the building department. The building department has a huge reserve fund, and I think it had to do with that. I can't find what I was looking for. Reva, you know what I'm talking about?
Could you give her a clue? Maybe.
I thought I just did. Where the heck was it?
Oh, look, Reva's, she's going to respond.
So
yes.
I'm going to take a crack at this one through you, Madam Chair. So with the building department, so the building department is self-funded, and there are quite a few additional costs within the building department expected for 2022. So we have increased the revenues in that department by about 120,000, and that's just based on historically what we've seen over the last few years. But in terms of costs, we've allocated, there's the new position for the inspector, the property standards inspector position. So that's, about $88,000. There's also, service contract increases for the costing. There's the increase for the merchant fees that we've allocated there of about $11,000. There's almost $60,000 that we've allocated for insurance and recoveries of IT operating costs and SWB and all that stuff. So overall, we're actually anticipating that a portion of that reserve will actually be used to offset the costs in 2022. So we are planning on using a portion of that reserve, because I do know in conversation with various councillors is, they have asked about that building reserve and what is our plan for using that. Well, in 2022, we actually are planning on using a portion of that reserve. So it isn't just going to continue to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, because the building department reserve now is almost $2 million. And I found what I was looking for. You said in your prelude, operational spending 3.9 million, which includes contributions, and then under that, the bullet points, it says building reserve 156,378 to balance the building department. I'm not sure what balance the building department means.
So again, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, the building department's budget needs to balance so that there's no net levy impact, right? So part of that, that funding, so you can see, in my presentation, that funding source, we're anticipating to use $156,000 of the building reserve to be able to fund those costs. That's what that was about. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Withey?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for that. All right, are there any other questions? I don't see any. So at this point, I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask Crystal, that's who I'm going to ask. Would you like us to vote on this motion given what we just went through, or would that be helpful as part of the staff direction, or?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I could provide a little bit of background, and I will admit it will be some short-term pain, and then hopefully in the long run it kind of cleans everything up to come forward again. Because of the motion that was previously passed, so asking staff to come back with some more information, my recommendation would be to actually see if the mover and seconder concur and withdraw this motion. And then if you'd like to pass the chair back to the mayor, then I think we actually need to deal with the corporate services motion and then go back and deal with the operations from this morning. And as I said, I know it'll be a bit of a short-term pain, but that way you can come back nice and clean at the December 15th meeting rather than trying to bring back multiple things for that meeting, if everyone's in agreement with that.
Okay, so the mover and seconder, I think I've read them. And the first one was Councillor Fitzgerald and seconded by Councillor Wiebe. Would you both consider withdrawing your names? Yes, a thumbs up from Councillor Wiebe and a thumbs up from Councillor Fitzgerald. So that part is done. Motion withdrawn.
Thank you.
Do I need to say anything else, or is that sufficient?
No, that's sufficient. And if it's okay, I would recommend passing the chair back over to the mayor at this time. And then I do have some motions drafted to deal with the other two divisions so that, again, it's nice and clean at the end.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Over to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Crystal, didn't we already withdraw the corporate service one before we kept going there?
We actually tabled it. So we just need to take it from the table to withdraw it.
Okay. Can we have a mover and seconder to withdraw the corporate service motion? Councillor Withey and Councillor Wiebe. All in favor of withdrawing the corporate service motion? And that carries. Did you say we need 2/3?
Not for that one, for the next
Okay.
we do, because we're going to now go to operations. So I'll pull it up here because we do need a motion to reconsider first, and then same thing, the motion to come up and then withdraw it. So I'll share my
I have a question. Can I vote if I wasn't there this morning?
You can, it's completely up to you.
Can we get a mover and seconder to reconsider the operations motion? Deputy Mayor Alcott, a seconder? Can't see any, I can't see all the people. Councillor Withey? It's recommended that committee reconsider the draft 2022 Operations and Protective Services operating budget as attached to Corp 2021-84. And I better see the screen. So this one we need 2/3. All in favor? 6. That carries.
And Mayor Terziano, I know the mover was Councillor Armour, and the seconder was actually yourself. So if you two concur, then you can just withdraw that motion.
I concur. All in favor of the withdrawal? And that carries. Is that all the business?
Thank you.
I then have a resolution moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock and seconded by Councillor Thompson. It is recommended that we do now adjourn at 4:01 p.m. All in favor? And that too carries. Until Wednesday morning.